On today's World Insight, big push for diplomacy amid the security crisis over Ukraine. Can renewed talks between Russia and the West help fend off a brewing conflict? And as China celebrates the Lantern Festival, we catch up with Chinese students overseas who yearn to be home. How are they coping so far from their families during the holidays?
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei, and happy Lantern Festival. We begin with simmering tensions between Russia and the West over Ukraine. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky declared, quote, a day of unity on Wednesday amid U.S. claims of an imminent Russian invasion. The tensions are heightened as world leaders forge ahead with talks. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz earlier met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, part of an intense diplomatic scramble. Moscow says it seeks to negotiate a new treaty that would satisfy all countries' security concerns, particularly a written assurance that NATO will halt its eastward expansion. But earlier on Tuesday, Russian Ministry of Defense says some of its troops are returning to bases after completing military exercises. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for diplomacy, adding that the possibility of war is something Europe cannot accept. So, is it possible for all parties to dial back tensions in the coming days? Insights from our panelists. More on the Ukraine crisis. We are joined in Kiev, Peter Zomayev, who is the director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative. In Moscow, Pavel Felgenhauer, a Russian political and defense analyst. In Shanghai, Zhao Long, professor from the Center for Russian and Central Studies from Shanghai Institute for International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Things are happening by hours as we speak. Let's try to catch up with the latest. There are so many different sources that are trying to bring out information. It's very hard to believe which is right, which is wrong, which is false, and which is true, who are fabricating and who are providing real information. I hope with your insights we can try to clarify at least some of the logics behind all of these chaos, apparent chaos. So let me go to you, Mr. Zomayev. Now, the president of your country had been asking, when he was asked by journalists about the so-called imminent invasion of Ukraine by Wednesday, he said, give me more information if you have. Who is actually behind this? What do I need to know? Now, that's very interesting, isn't it? We see that being circled around for quite some time. Do you have any information about where does that information, quote unquote, come from?
Well, it comes from the White House. You know, it's been Joe Biden's strategy, the American president's strategy all along to to ring the alarm bells and insist on an imminent invasion of Ukraine in what has been called megaphone diplomacy, designed to put Russia on the defensive. And at the same time to unite Western countries, members of NATO and European Union, in their response to Russia and its aggression against Ukraine. The recalcitrant members, such as Germany, for example, that's been really hard to get Germany on board with the White House's position. And Joe Biden can, with some justification, claim that he's been able to succeed doing so. Mr. Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, was here just yesterday in Kiev. He is here in Moscow today, meeting with Vladimir Putin, and he's been saying pretty harsh things as far as what what Germany will do should Russia invade. So that's been like part of the American strategy all along. It's created a little bit of a tension, to say the least, between Ukraine and America. And Vladimir Zelensky has been at pains to keep Ukrainians calm and free of too much stress.
Seems that similar questions have also been asked by the Russian side, Mr. Felgenhauer. As far as I understand, according to Itatas news agency, the deputy representative of Russia at the United Nations actually did not confirm when being asked about information regarding so-called Wednesday invasion that have been circling in the media for some time. And he asked what is actually behind the quote-unquote, timing. Mr. Felgenhauer, how do you take that question?
Well, this is kind of normal when wars kind of in a pre-war or close-to-war situation. 19th century military thinker Karl von Clausewitz called it the fog of war, and that's a fog, informational fog, when there's very conflicting information coming in a war situation. It's very hard to figure out what's really happening. Of course, the Russian official position is that Russia is not, has no intention to attack anyone. Russia is a peaceful nation. The exercises that were happening were just a kind of move to defend Russian borders, and it was happening on Russian territory. And of course, yesterday, during a meeting between President Putin and Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, it was announced that a number of exercises of Russian military will be completed and the troops will return to permanent bases, though other exercises will continue. So right now we're in a kind of ambiguous situation. There's been official reports and footage of troops moving to home bases, but of course there's also reports of other forces moving out, and not so much about Ukraine, like say sending anti-carrier aircraft to Syria. So we're not out of the woods. It's still a very tense situation, but it will not last long. I'm sure that in the coming week or a week and a half, the situation will somehow be resolved. I believe, I hope that there is going to be a genuine de-escalation.
What do you mean by likely to be resolved? What is backing your confidence, quote unquote?
Well, the Russian military, not only around Ukraine, but in the entire country, at a super high state of readiness, sort of cocked and loaded. And they can't stay in such a position for continuously. They'll have to step down, and I believe that's going to be more or less a strategic decision made if there are no sudden changes. And so there's going to be a step down. That's not that the situation is resolved. This is just de-escalation for the time being, but without a comprehensive political solution. We're going to have the same crisis maybe in half a year, and maybe it will be even worse than today.
Yeah. Mr. Zhao, how do you see the apparent crisis? I'm using plural forms because it seems that there are crises between Russia and Kiev, apparently, and there's also crisis about the trust between Kiev and maybe the United States, as the president of Ukraine has been asking the U.S. president to visit Ukraine if there is imminent crisis facing the nation. And of course, the White House turned down that invitation, saying the president is not going to make that visit. So there's another layer that among Western countries themselves, Europeans, particularly France, Germany, and also the United States. And then there's also, of course, NATO. Meanwhile, there's also the bigger issue about Eurasia, the role of Russia and how likely things are likely to proceed. Mr. Zhao, it's a very complex picture.
Yes, indeed. I think we have seen in last few days the early results from the shuttle diplomacy made by the leaders of European countries. So as you mentioned, the latest news shows that some Russian troops is willing to withdraw from the Black Sea region. I think it will create some condition for the next round of negotiation between Russia and NATO. But however, the development of the whole situation is quite difficult to escape the narrative of major power game between Russia and the United States. So that's why I think the Normandy model of talks without the participation of the United States are quite difficult to produce some effective results. And we should have a more observation on the U.S. How U.S. evaluates and how U.S. would adjust its policy with regard to the Ukraine crisis. But overall, I think although the war worries are rising, but the unwillingness to have some real conflict it still prevails. So everybody is now setting quite a kind of a tone of a possible war. So they can also be viewed as an opportunity for them to setting up their own agenda and goals. So I agree with the colleague just mentioned. I think they will continue to showing up their muscles in the military level, but we'll continue to also to having more pressure, warnings against each other. But the new round of political dialogue may also be restarted in the near future.
Mr. Zalmayev, when there are two big, players fighting, it is the grass that hurts the most, I guess, as they say, according to traditional idioms. So what is the current atmosphere in Ukraine where you are about, the relationship between Russia and the United States and Ukraine apparently being caught in the middle somewhat?
Well, it has been caught in the middle for quite some time. Ukrainians are under no illusion that the U.S. and the West will be welcoming them, for example, to NATO. That prospect has been put behind. Actually, just moved away further and further, and that is actually part of Vladimir Putin's strategy. He really knows that Russia is not going to expand to include Ukraine in the next few years. When you ask about the mood of Ukrainians, it is full of resolve, contrary to some media reports that planes full of oligarchs and rich businessmen have left Kiev over the last few days, and that actually is true. Most Ukrainians have nowhere to go. Most are digging in. They're ready to face the enemy, so to speak, and they've been at it for, don't forget, the conflict has been going on since 2014. Yeah. Russia has, in fact, been occupying Ukraine, has, in fact, been constantly invading Ukraine by virtue of holding Crimea and the east of Ukraine. So that is something to be aware of. Ukrainians have been at war for many, many years already.
Mr. Zhao, we have 30 seconds left. Anything to say, respond to the other guests, and also wrapping up?
Well, I think Ukraine has already included its desire for the membership of the EU and the NATO into its constitution. So I think it's quite difficult for the Ukraine leaders to make policy changes in this regard. So there's a very few options for the Ukraine government except to rely on the Western protection and to have more dialogue with the NATO and the EU. Okay. So that's why I think all parties should, in this classic geopolitical game, should have more flexibility and pragmatism for their agenda setting and policy making.
Well, wrapping up today's discussion, time is up. Zhao Long, Peter Zalmayev, and Pavel Felgenhauer, really appreciate it. Thank you for your insights. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. To come in our program later, as China celebrates the Lantern Festival with the ongoing Winter Olympics competitions, we catch up with Chinese students overseas who yearn to be home. How are they coping so far from their families during the holidays? Meanwhile, how are they celebrating the winter spirits where they are? Welcome back. This is World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Tuesday is China's traditional Lantern Festival, the 15th day on the first lunar month. It marks the end of the Spring Festival celebrations. It is a carnival of lanterns with a history of more than 2,000 years. Lanterns were lit up for good luck, along with hopes for peace. Other traditions include eating rice dumplings named yuanxiao or tangyuan. The dumplings are round in shape to symbolize family reunion. But unlike past years, the Lantern Festival coincides with the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, with festivities the backdrop of the winter sports spectacle. For most people in China, it was an ordinary yet special spring festival. For Chinese students overseas, far from home, the holidays can be a lonely time, especially under the COVID pandemic, but they are working very hard to celebrate it. For most, going back home is not an option yet, so Chinese New Year is more than just a celebration. It's also about finding connections to home, no matter where they are. In Columbus, Ohio, Nathan Wang, junior student from Ohio State University. Good to see you. Hi, in Toronto, Paul Wang, senior student at Toronto University. Good to see you as well.
Nice to see you.
Happy the Lantern Festival to both of you.
Thank you. And you too.
Thank you so much. So what about your Spring Festival? As you may know, Chinese are celebrating Spring Festival from the very first day of Lunar New Year until the 15th, which is the Lantern Festival, like today. So how you been celebrating, Nathan?
Our spring semester has already started, but me and my friends, and especially Chinese international students, we still take this festival very seriously. We made dumplings together. We made New Year's Eve dinner together, and we also set off fireworks and firecrackers together.
Really?
So,
you did?
Yeah. Though it is restricted in many big cities in China, but there are many retailers here. So me and my friends, we bought many fireworks and firecrackers.
What about for you, Paul?
We cooking together, and also we keep some traditions we bring back from China. We watch the CCTV Spring Festival Gala show together at home, and also my parents is also in Toronto. They are here to accompany my brother to study here. But this is my 8th year in Canada. For the last 6 years, I always celebrate with my homestay and also with my friend.
Interesting. Nathan, for you though, how long you been there?
I've been here for almost 2 years because of the pandemic. Though I'm junior, but I only stayed in the States for 2 years.
I see. So both of you cannot travel back to China, but you did have your own celebrations, I understand. Nathan, you were even participating in the Spring Festival Gala of your own, in a way. Tell me more about that.
I believe that in North America, and there are international students organizations, Chinese international students organizations, and they held an Spring Festival Gala. And me and my band, we presented our original song on the gala.
Really? So what's the name of your band?
My band's name is The Gazing Blanket. And our song is Planet Client, which is pretty good. And you can hear it on NE.
So you're a bass player?
Yeah, I'm a bass player.
Great.
Yeah.
So you're gonna be able to play a little bit piece of bass for us?
Yeah.
Great. So Nathan, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So what are you gonna play for us?
Just a little piece written by myself.
Oh, you wrote it?
Yeah, it's just a simple jam. My simple jam.
Wow, looking forward. Okay, great. Let's start. Pretty cool. Thank you so much, Nathan. Paul, compared to the band at the Spring Festival Gala organized by the Chinese students in Ohio, so tell me more about how you've been celebrating. Besides what's the kind of food that you've been cooking?
Dumplings, of course, dumplings. Chinese always eat dumplings at Spring Festival. And also we mentioned, I think Nathan mentioned Spring Festival Gala, like there's student organization celebrated. I'm the president at Chinese Undergraduate Association at U of T. Mm-hmm. So I was to do some Spring Festival Gala like in Toronto, but suddenly the Toronto locked down because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah, so we have to celebrate by ourselves.
Right. So it's very different year, isn't it? It used to be traveling back to China, be with your family, but this year it's very different. So how is that likely to be a combination of the Spring Festival, the homework, schoolwork, and also a very challenging pandemic situation, Paul?
I still have some extracurricular activities I always do to release stress. I do snowboarding. You know, I'm a student in Canada. There's a lot
yes.
going on here. So I think even there's pandemic, we can do some outside activities like snowboarding, skiing, right? Not indoor, but outdoor.
And what about the other fellow Chinese students in Toronto? Uplifting spirit or actually feeling very challenging?
Yes, that's right. Because Toronto is very strict with COVID-19. We have over 10,000 cases here, but Toronto government, the local government, locked down the city. So for students, we can only go to school and stay at home, and we cannot dine inside the restaurant.
How do you see, China's performance so far of dealing with the pandemic, and how do you see, a very different approach where you are, Paul?
I was in China last year and just came back. I can see actually Chinese, China's policy is very, very well in COVID-19. There's almost 0 cases in most of the provinces and cities.
Nathan, what about for you? Ohio, as far as I understand, is a state that is very much challenged by the pandemic in the U.S. And so how do you and your fellow Chinese students dealing with that situation?
The school requires students who are living on campus in dorms to do the COVID-19 saliva test every week to report their condition to the school. And whenever an individual is infected by the virus, the individual is required to do the isolation by themselves.
Now in China, the Beijing Olympics, Winter Olympics are going on, and people are fascinated by winter sports. And also, people are fascinated by that in a closed loop in Beijing and in Zhangjiakou, athletes, coaches, journalists from around the world have managed to get to China. So Nathan and Paul, in Toronto and Ohio, I understand both have cold weathers. So what about people's enthusiasm for Winter Olympics or winter sports? Nathan?
It might be a coincidence. So during the Olympics, Winter Olympics, our school held a ice hockey competition with another school. Oh. And I can really saw people's enthusiasm about winter sports. Many people came to see the competition, though me myself, I didn't go to the competition because I want to keep the social distance. But I saw that it was very crowded around the arena. So people are very enthusiastic about winter sports and also sports.
What about for you, Paul?
Of course, I actually wake up in the morning to watch the Winter Olympic opening ceremony because I'm a fan of winter sports, and also I know a lot of my Canadian friends are watching the Winter Olympic because Canadians have long history of skiing and snowboarding and all those winter sports.
Yeah.
So here's people in Canada is very excited about the Olympic Games, and also for me, I also bring my own enthusiasm to this to Beijing 2022. I got my level 1 instructor at Canadian Association of Snowboard Instructor.
Oh.
Pretty excited.
Congrats. We are wrapping up today's discussion. Is there anything you want to say to your family, to your friends in China, and also to your friends in Canada, in the US, and beyond?
I'll start first. Yeah. For my friends in Ohio, I hope you to be safe in this pandemic, and we are together. Yeah, and keep social distance, and we will beat the pandemic together.
Okay.
And to my family in China, I have to say I miss them so much. This winter is hard for me because I never spent a winter in the States before, and I miss Beijing hot pot a lot. Yeah, Beijing hot pot.
I hope you'll be able to go to the local grocery store and get some good vegetables and meat and make your own version of the hot pot. But hopefully you will be able to come back to China soon and also have the shall I say, the authentic hot pot in Beijing. Yeah. And what about for you, Paul? Best wishes, things you want to say to your families and loved ones.
Like for my family in China, I want to say as our generation getting more mature, and my grandparents in my mother's side and father's side are getting older. So I really want to come back to China to see them soon. And I will graduate this year, and I will be back in China soon. And for my friend in Canada, I have to say, please watch 2022 Beijing Olympic Games.
I'm sure they are, because the Team Canada is doing very well, by the way, at the games as well. So I want to thank both of you, Yi Chen, Nathan Wang, and Paul Wang in Canada and in the US. All the best wishes from us to you and to also your friends where you are. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy Lantern Festival.
Happy Lantern Festival.
Happy Lantern Festival to all of you as well. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of my team, thanks for being with us, and bye for now.